We've had the 2-year anniversary since the U.S. and the Trump administration decided to take out the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard who was conducting operations against U.S. troops, targeting U.S. troops to their terror forces, their Quds forces throughout Syria. As we were battling ISIS, they were also targeting U.S. troops to kill. He was taken out. Iranians have, again, they start talking. They start a lot of propaganda around this, a lot of threats. They call for the killing and the assassination of President Trump and Secretary Pompeo. But they've also gone further because on Friday, as we said, there was an interview on Israel with their foreign minister, and he asked if they had the ability to strike Iran's uranium enrichment facilities, which some are buried deep in the mountains. And he said yes. And the world knows some of our capabilities, and we have some capabilities the world doesn't even know about. Didn't say we're going to go do this tomorrow. Didn't say we want to go start a war with Iran. Israel certainly doesn't want that. But then on Monday, Iran's foreign minister, utilizing Twitter, hits back. Says, well, we'll forcefully and rationally defend the rights, interests, and progress of the Iranian people. Okay, whatever. But then, of course, Zionism has no place in the future of the world. Twitter doesn't take that down. Twitter doesn't ban him for life. Twitter has no problem there. Rick Grenell is joining us now, our Senior Advisor for Foreign Policy and National Security and former Acting Director of National Intelligence. Rick, I mean, this, again, it shows the double standard of the social media world, but also the rhetoric that is okay as long as it's anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, or even anti-American, like calling for the assassination of a U.S. president and a former Secretary of State.
Look, it's shocking that they are allowed to be on Twitter. They are a human rights denier. They deny women basic rights every single day. The idea that they are allowed to spew this hate on a platform like Twitter, and Twitter doesn't even notice, is an outrage. You layer on top of that the fact that Twitter is really jumpy towards conservatives and aggressive about silencing conservatives. I think we've got a real problem here. But on the larger issue of Iran, what the Israeli foreign minister did, Jordan, was give a credible threat of military action. This is something that the Biden administration hasn't been able to do. In fact, we're getting press reports that when they showed up in Vienna for the initial talks, the Americans, through Rob Malley, who has been a disaster negotiator since the days of Bill Clinton, giving away everything to the Iranians, he's a very weak negotiator. He showed up and presented the Iranians such a package that the word from the media in D.C. is that even Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor at the White House, has been outraged. They're not on the same page here in the Biden administration. You've got the weak negotiators starting to make the normal people within the Biden administration angry.
Rick, I'm looking at these statements coming out, and it's shocking to me that this negotiation, even if it's going through intermediaries, as Colonel Smith pointed out, you've got, if Trump and Pompeo are not tried in a court for the criminal act of assassinating General Soleimani, Muslims will take out martyrs' revenge. I mean, I want people to understand what they're saying here. We are negotiating with these people, the United States. They are calling for a trial of the former Secretary of State and the former President of the United States for the act of assassinating the head of the Revolutionary Guard who killed American soldiers. And then the threat is Muslims will take our martyrs' revenge. And of course, everyone's acting like in the body politic, like, well, that's just them speaking. The outrage here should be palpable. People should understand this and feel the outrage. But I get concerned that we're numb to this in the United States.
It's a really good point. We are numb to this because currently this Biden administration is negotiating with terrorists. You cannot get around that. That is the fact. They're negotiating with the Iranian regime. They just had a massive failure in Afghanistan. And you don't think that the Iranians saw that weakness? When Rob Malley shows up, who has consistently been weak, and the Iranians love him, when he shows up with a very generous offer that makes Jake Sullivan cringe, you know that we're in trouble. But to your point, Jay, we are negotiating, the United States is negotiating with terrorists right now, and this is a low point.
Wes?
Yeah, you know, Rick, one of the things I think about too is that the Iranians are obviously dragging their feet and playing hardball in Vienna. Do you think, actually, a couple of questions. Do you think, first of all, that they really are on the verge of having their first nuclear weapon, and they know this, that the uranium enrichment level is far beyond the 60% that we know about, so they're counting on that? I wonder what your thoughts are about that. And then also, when you look at the world in which we live, it's a dangerous world, brand new year. You've got Russia possibly invading Ukraine. You've got China possibly taking Taiwan by force. And now the Iranians about to have a nuclear weapon. Do you see the possibility for strategic cooperation between those three enemies of the United States?
So I have to be very careful in how I answer this question, because I know that the current DNI is watching my words very carefully. I know this through outreach that has been done.
Right.
And I need to be very careful in saying what I know about negotiations. But let me just drop back a little bit and be general.
Okay.
And the fact of the matter is that the Iranians are not telling the truth. Anyone who reads U.S. intelligence, any of the Five Eyes country that is watching the intelligence, knows that the Iranian regime is lying. We've caught them publicly. There have been press reports, and I can quote press reports, about them lying about heavy water, about the number of centrifuges. Unfortunately, people like John Kerry and Rob Malley keep forgiving the Iranians, and therefore there is no other explanation than they believe that the Iranians are telling them the truth and just made mistakes, accounting mistakes or numbers mistakes, which is beyond ridiculous.
But if they do, go ahead, Rick.
I was just going to finish by saying, I believe that what we have right now are people that want to bring the Iranian regime, the current mass murdering terrorist regime, into the international fold and begin to have a normal relationship with them, because they believe that if we engage with them, that they will go down the path of being a more responsible nation. And China has proven, when we let them into the WTO, that's not true.
You know, Rick, you say they take them at their word, they make mistakes, but why not then take them at their word when they say, if the former president, former secretary of state aren't criminally prosecuted by the world, by the ICC, then we're calling on Muslims to rise up and kill them. Then why not take them at their word for that?
Because the State Department is filled with people who just believe that engagement is the only way. They have a very hard time holding people to account. There are no consequences for behavior. There's only forgiveness. There's too much mercy and not enough justice, if you want to put it into biblical terms.
Yeah.
And I believe that that's a real problem. If you want to have effective diplomacy, you need diplomacy with muscle that creates standards.
I want to, I'm looking at some headlines, Rick. Politico, Iran nuclear talks resume, but time is running out to strike a deal. Foreign policy, the Biden team knows its Iran policy is failing. But Iran is the largest exporter of terrorism, especially in that region. And we know that. And we've got just about a minute and a half here. But the fact is, to be negotiating with them right now sends such a horrible signal to our allies.
Look, the Biden administration is currently negotiating with the Taliban. They are supporting Lebanese government that is in coalition with Hezbollah. We are forcing the Israelis to sit down with a government that hasn't had an election since 2005 and whose coalition partner is Hamas. And now what we have is a administration who's negotiating with the Iranian regime at the same table and pretending like they're part of the international community. This is an outrage. We need to have standards.
I'll tell you this. I really appreciate you taking time, Rick, and appreciate you being part of our team. And I also appreciated your hesitancy on what you were saying. Totally understandable. And folks, I think it underscores the fact of how fortunate we are at the ACLJ to have someone like Rick Grenell as part of the team here.